Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace the roots of modern capitalism back to, well, a surprisingly flavorful source, the global trade in tea and spices. We're going to see how the simple desire for a better tasting cup of tea, a little nutmeg on your food, ended up building empires, creating the world's first multinational corporations, and basically laying the foundation for the global economy we all live in today. Okay, so let's just dive right into this because the answer is kind of wild. It reveals how the world's first massive corporations were born from a very simple, very human desire to show off. Seriously, this wasn't just about flavor. Entire wars were fought, and just an unbelievable amount of human suffering was caused over stuff that was, at the end of the day, a luxury good designed to impress your friends at a dinner party. You have to understand, back in the 17th and 18th centuries, tea and spices were not just flavorings. No, they were the ultimate status symbols. Think of today's biggest luxury brands. That's what spices were. Getting them from Asia all the way to Europe was incredibly dangerous and expensive, which made them super rare. So if you served your guests food with exotic spices, that was a massive flex. It was your way of screaming, I am wealthy, I am powerful, and I am connected. Now, you might have heard this myth that spices were so important because they helped preserve rotten meat, or at least cover up the taste. But the reality is much, much simpler. Spices were way more expensive than fresh meat. I mean, it wasn't even close. So this quote on the screen just hits the nail on the head. You wouldn't waste something that was literally worth more than its weight in gold on bad food. The real motivation was pure uncut luxury. It was all about showing that you could afford the absolute best. So you have this huge demand for luxury goods, but the voyages to get them were insanely risky. You're talking pirates, treacherous seas, rival nations. The costs were enormous. This created a problem that needed a totally revolutionary solution. And to fund these incredibly ambitious trips, they had to invent a whole new way of doing business. And, well, what they came up with, it changed the world forever. So here's how they solved it. The Dutch government basically forced a bunch of smaller, competing trade companies to merge into one. The idea was, by pooling all their resources, they could create a single, massive company to completely dominate the spice trade. It was called the Verenigde Oost-Indisch Compagnie, which is a mouthful, so we'll just call it the VOC. And it was granted a 21-year monopoly and powers that were usually reserved only for a state. And just to give you an idea of the sheer scale we're talking about here, at its absolute peak, the VOC became the most valuable company in all of human history. We're talking nearly $8 trillion in today's money. I mean, that is more than Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon combined. This was a for-profit company that was more powerful than most of history's greatest empires. It's just insane. So, the big question is, how on earth do you fund a business plan that ambitious? Well, to raise the colossal amount of capital they needed, the VOC basically invented the concept of shareholders. For the very first time, a company's ownership was chopped up into little pieces called shares that could be bought and sold by the general public. This was it. This was the world's first initial public offering, or IPO. And this new system allowed anyone to invest, not just the super rich. Take the story of a housemaid named Neeltje Cornelia. She invested her entire life savings, 100 guilders. It was a tiny, tiny stake in the company, but that investment, today, it would be worth a staggering amount of money. And to make all this buying and selling of shares easier, the world's first ever stock exchange opened its doors in Amsterdam in 1611. So, as you can imagine, the wild success of this Dutch model quickly inspired a pretty powerful rival, the British East India Company. And listen, while the VOC was a corporate titan, the British EIC, they took the whole idea of corporate power to a terrifying, completely unprecedented new level. You see, they started out as just a group of merchants who were granted a royal charter. But over time, the EIC secured more and more power from the British Crown, and it transformed itself from a private business into an empire in its own right. It wasn't just trading anymore, it was conquering. I mean, the escalation was just chilling. By 1661, this private company was given the right to acquire territory, to mint its own money, command its own fortresses and troops, declare war, and enforce its own laws over huge territories. They were essentially a state within a state, operating completely outside of English law. Just think about that for a second. By the 19th century, this private company's own army was significantly larger than the army of the British government itself. Can you even imagine that today? A modern corporation with its own military force that outnumbers that of a major world power? It's unbelievable. Okay, so all these corporate innovations, these private armies, they were all funded by an immense extraction of wealth from Asia. And this relentless pursuit of profit came at a devastating, almost unimaginable human cost. The story isn't just about stocks and spices, it's also about subjugation. And the pursuit of profit led to a truly horrifying list of abuses. These companies betrayed their allies, they undermined stable local economies, they imposed crippling taxes, and they used slave labor. They just systematically erased local ways of life, all while prioritizing their bottom line over actual human life. And maybe nothing illustrates this better than the Great Bengal Famine. The company's policies, like forcing farmers to grow cash crops like opium instead of, food, made a drought so much worse, turning it into a catastrophic famine. And while millions of people were starving, the company didn't let up. They kept extracting revenue, which led to the deaths of up to 10 million people. That's a third of Bengal's entire population. But this story, it doesn't just end in the 18th century. Not even close. In fact, it's really just the beginning. The structures and the practices, both the brilliant and the brutal ones, that were born from the spice trade are deeply, deeply embedded in the DNA of our global economy right now, today. And what's really incredible is how directly you can map these historical innovations onto the core features of modern capitalism. The publicly traded company, the multinational corporation, shareholder activism, even sketchy financial schemes. Yep, they all have their roots right here. Get this. Even the dark arts of finance were basically invented here. Company employees were making absolute fortunes through private, illegal side deals. But how do you get all that dirty money back home? Well, a governor named Thomas Pitt perfected a system. You convert your illicit cash into something high value and easy to carry, in his case, a massive diamond, smuggle it home, and sell it. He basically established the blueprint of placement, layering, and integration that's still used to clean dirty money today. And here's a perfect example of how even super complex market tools like short selling were born from just personal, high-stakes corporate drama. After being kicked out of the VOC, its largest shareholder, a guy named Isaac Lemire, wanted revenge. So he started spreading rumors about sinking ships and ruined cargo to drive the stock price down, selling shares he didn't even own, hoping to buy them back later for cheaper. It was history's first bear raid. So what does this all mean for us? Ultimately, it means that the global system of stocks and shareholders and multinational companies that we navigate every single day, it wasn't born in some sterile boardroom. It was forged in a brutal, centuries-long quest for luxury goods. It's a system that created incredible wealth and innovation for sure, but it was also built on a foundation of exploitation, leaving us with a powerful and a deeply complicated legacy to confront.